In this video, we are going to be introducing the idea of radians. And radians is another way to measure an angle. Rather than in degrees, we can have something in radians. When you're talking about radians, you're really just talking about circumference. And then when you're talking about circumference, you're talking about specifically a circumference of what we call a unit circle. Unit circle just means that we have a radius of 1. So if you have a circumference that has a radius of 1, then really you have a circumference of 2 pi, which decimal version of that is 6.28. All right, so here's some visuals to kind of show you what it looks like when you're talking about radians. And another way to think of this is that we are talking about circumference, which means if we're talking about, kind of smaller angles, anything other than 360, we're just talking about fractions of that circumference. So one other way to think of this is every circle has a radius, and that radius has this length. If you were to take that length and start to wrap it around the circle, like that would be 1 radian. If you wrapped 3 of them and connected them, that would be 3 radian. Notice how it doesn't quite go halfway around. If you were to go exactly halfway around, it'd be 3.14 radians or pi radians. So before we finish this, let's talk about a couple things that we compare degrees to radians. So 360 degrees is all the way around a circle, but so is 2 pi as a circumference. If you were to cut this in half, you would be talking about 180 degrees. And half of a circumference then would be pi. The decimal version of that is 3.14. So 3.14 radii kind of stacked on top of each other or kind of interconnected is exactly how long it would take to get halfway around, right? And then we'll just do 2 more. If you were to cut this in half again, 90 degrees would be half of that, which would be pi over 2. And then if you cut it in half again, half of a half would be pi over 4. And we could do this on and on and on and on for all sorts of different angles. But there is a nice way of converting from one value from a degree to a radian or a radian to a degree. So here are kind of your 2 situations. So when you're converting, and it depends on the direction you're going. If you're going from radians, which gets abbreviated as rad, you'll see that on some calculators, if it has rad on the top of it or in some setting, that's because your calculator's in radians. If you're converting that to degrees, what you're going to take is whatever your radian measurement is. All right, so a pi over 4, pi over 2, and you're going to multiply in a degree value and divide out an equivalent radian value. Okay, now I could have used all sorts of numbers, but that's probably the easiest ratio. So if we wanted to put 360 here, we'd put 2 pi here, but it really would simplify down to that if you wanted to. So you're multiplying in a degree, dividing out a radian. So then that means if you're going the other direction, if you're going from degrees to radians, so you're going from here to here, then you're doing exactly the opposite. You have a degree value, which means you want to multiply in a radian and divide out a degree, an equivalent degree. Okay, so halfway around is pi. That's why it's exactly 3.14 radii kind of stacked together. If you were to go further, 5 radians would take you that far. And then if you were to go all the way around the circle, which is 2 pi, which is 6.28, that would be 6.28 radians to go all the way around. All right, or 2 pi. So that's the decimal version. That's the pi version. Okay, so let's take a couple of these and convert. We have 20 degrees. If we're going to take 20 degrees and we're going to convert it into a radian, we're going to use the pi button, and we're going to round to the nearest 100. So it's 20 degrees and we're multiplying in a radian value and dividing out a degree value. And then we'll just let the calculator do its thing. All right, so if we have 20 degrees, we're going to multiply in pi, divide out 180. So we're getting about 0.35. All right, so there's 1 radian, and that's 1. And we'd be at 0.35. So we would be something smaller than that, which would make sense because we're talking about 20 degrees, which is small. All right, take 175, multiply in pi, divide out degrees. So if we throw that in the calculator, we're looking at 175 times pi divided by 180. So we get 3.0. All right, which again, hopefully makes some sense that 175 degrees is almost 180 degrees. So that value is almost 3.14. All right, if you have 2 radians, we're looking at this angle measurement here. So we're just past 90. So 2 radians would be us multiplying in a degree value, dividing out a radian equivalent. So we're taking 2 times 180 divided by pi. That'll get us past 90. So let's see what it's saying, round to the nearest 10,000. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So the 5 is going to bump that 5 up to a 6. So 114.56. All right, and then pi over 2. So we're going to take, I'll put pi over 2 in its own parenthesis, and we're going to take pi over 2 and convert it out of radians, which means we're multiplying in a degree value and dividing out pi. Now, actually, I can do this without a calculator because the pi's just cancel. And then I'm looking at 180 divided by 2, which is 90. So some things kind of clean up real nice. All right, and then the last two is taking 1 radian, which is that right there, trying to figure out what its angle measurement is, and then we're going to convert it into degrees, minutes, and seconds. So it's 1 radian times 180 divided by pi, okay, and that's going to equal something. So 1 times 180 divided by pi. Okay, so 57.29, and I'm not going to lose any of the values, so 57.29, blah, blah, blah. And then I want to convert it into degrees, minutes, and seconds. So that's just something on my calculator. So I'm going to hit this angle button right there, right above the word apps. So I'm going to go second angle, and we are going to convert, that's what the triangle represents, convert to degrees, minutes, and seconds. So there we go. And then we're going to round to the nearest second, it says. So it's going to be 57 degrees, 17 minutes, and then 45 seconds. Okay, so 1 radian, that value would be around 57 degrees. Right. And we'll do one more, 2.5. So 2.5 is we're going to multiply in a degree value, and we're going to divide out a radian equivalent. So 2.5 times 180 divided by pi, right, is 143.23, blah, 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 don't round. And we're going to convert. So I got to go into the angle value right above apps again. Second angle, convert. And there's our 143 degrees, 14 minutes, and then this time just 22 seconds. All right. So that was a little bit of an introduction to radians. And radians, again, is just talking about circumference. So we're talking about fractions of a circumference when we start going around the circle.